The carriage lurched so violently that Evelyn Carter's head struck the window frame for the fourth time in less than an hour. She pressed her hand to her temple and swallowed the sharp word that tried to escape her lips. "Stop moving," Mrs. Whitmore said from across the carriage without opening her eyes. "You sound like a frightened horse." "I am only trying to keep my skull intact," Evelyn replied softly. "Your skull is of little importance. Did you pack my medicine case?" "Yes." "Go, ma'am." "And the drops for my nerves?" "Yes." "And the powder for my headaches?" "Yes." Mrs. Whitmore opened one pale eye and studied her. "You are certain?" "I am certain. I packed everything myself." The old woman sniffed and leaned back against her cushions. Outside the window, the hills of western Massachusetts rolled under the late summer sun. They were traveling to Ashford Manor, the grand estate of the Duke of Ashford. A week-long house party had been arranged, and every eligible young woman in 3 states had found a reason to attend. Evelyn was not one of them. 5 years ago, she would have been invited in her own name. She had once been Miss Evelyn Carter, daughter of Judge Thomas Carter of Boston, raised in a large brick house with music in the evenings and books in every room. That life had ended with her father's sudden death and the discovery of debts no one had known about. The house was sold, the furniture auctioned, friends disappeared. Well, her fiancé, Charles Bennett, had withdrawn his proposal within the month and married a banker's daughter instead. Now, Evelyn was companion to Mrs. Abigail Whitmore, a sharp-tongued widow with failing eyesight and no patience for foolishness. "You are brooding," Mrs. Whitmore said. "I am not." "You are. I can hear it in your breathing. If you must pity yourself, do it efficiently. 15 minutes. Then stop." Evelyn almost smiled. That was the closest the old woman ever came to kindness. But the carriage rolled through iron gates taller than a church steeple. Ashford Manor rose in the distance, all gray stone and towering windows, built in stages over a century. It stood proud and cold against the sky. Evelyn felt something twist inside her chest. She knew why they were here. The Duke of Ashford was said to be choosing a wife. He was wealthy beyond measure. His estate stretched across New York and Massachusetts. His tenants depended on him. His name carried weight in every drawing room from Boston to Philadelphia, and he was known for one strange habit. He made lists of investments, lists of household staff, lists of acquaintances, and most disturbingly, lists of potential brides. He ranked them: dowry, family name, health, temperament, as if a wife were no more than a business decision. "Disgusting," Mrs. Whitmore muttered as the carriage stopped. "Marriage is not livestock trading." Evelyn helped her out carefully. Servants hurried forward. Luggage was carried inside. The entrance hall of Ashford Manor was vast and polished, echoing with footsteps and low voices. Chandeliers glowed overhead. Portraits of past dukes stared down from the walls. Evelyn moved quietly behind Mrs. Whitmore, guiding her to the assigned rooms in the east wing. Her own room was small and plain, clearly meant for a maid. She did not mind. She had slept in worse places. After settling Mrs. Whitmore with tea and her evening medicine, Evelyn finally allowed herself a moment alone. She stood at the narrow window and looked at the gardens below. She did not belong here. Not anymore. That evening, while the other guests gathered for dinner, Evelyn slipped away in search of the library. Books had always been her refuge. Ashford Manor's library was magnificent. 3 levels of shelves lined the walls. Ladders rolled along polished rails. The air smelled of leather and old paper. She walked slowly between the shelves, letting her fingers brush the spines. At the far end of the room, a smaller door stood slightly open. Light spilled through the gap. She should not intrude. She knew that. But she stepped forward anyway. The smaller room was warmer. A fire burned low in the hearth, and a massive desk sat in the center, covered with neat stacks of papers. And behind the desk sat a man. He did not look up. "And what do you require?" His voice was calm, cool. "I beg your pardon," Evelyn said quickly. "I did not realize anyone was here. I was looking for a book." The main library contains thousands. I was hoping for something less decorative and more readable. Now he looked up. His eyes were gray, sharp, assessing. He was tall, even seated, broad-shouldered, a dark hair touched faintly with silver at the temples. His face was handsome, in a distant way, controlled. "You are Mrs. Whitmore's companion," he said. "Yes." "Miss Carter." She stiffened slightly. "Yes." "I am Sebastian Ashford." Of course he was. The Duke. He gestured toward the door. "This study is private." "I understand." She turned to leave. Then she saw the paper on his desk. A list. Columns of names. Notes beside each. Family. Fortune. Health. Temperament. Her pulse quickened. She let out a short, disbelieving laugh before she could stop herself. His gaze snapped back to her. "Is something amusing, Miss Carter?" "You spelled dependable incorrectly," she said. Silence filled the room. "I beg your pardon." "It has 2 E's," she added calmly. "You are missing one." He stared at her. You are correcting my spelling." "Yes." "You are aware that you are standing in my private study." "Yes." "You are aware that I am the Duke of Ashford." "Yes." "Then why," he asked slowly, "are you not apologizing?" Evelyn felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she did not look away. "Because you left your list visible," she said. "And if you intend to evaluate women like racehorses, the least you can do is spell correctly." The air between them shifted. He stood, but he was taller than she had expected. He moved around the desk and stopped a few feet from her. "You believe my method offensive. I believe it cold. And you believe you understand marriage better than I do. I believe marriage requires more than columns and ink." For a moment, she thought he might throw her out. Instead, he studied her as if she were a puzzle he had not planned to solve. "You are not on the guest list," he said suddenly. "I am a companion. We are assumed. We're not invited." He walked back to his desk, picked up his pen. He drew a firm line through one of the names. Then he wrote another. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Correcting an oversight." He looked up. "You are now." Her name stared back at her from the bottom of the page. "Miss Evelyn Carter." You cannot be serious." "I am always serious. I have no dowry. I am aware. My family has no influence. I am aware. My temperament is clearly unsuitable." A faint shadow of a smile touched his mouth. "That," he said, "is precisely what interests me." Her heart beat too fast. "This is foolish." "Perhaps. You are expected to court Miss Caroline Hargrove. Everyone says so. Everyone says many things." "And what do you say?" He held her gaze. "I say you laughed at me," he said quietly. "No one has laughed at me in years." She swallowed. "You should not make decisions based on irritation." "On the contrary," he replied. "Disruption is often enlightening." And she took a step back. "This is a mistake." "Perhaps," he said again, "but I find I do not wish to correct it." The sound of distant voices drifted through the main library. Dinner was beginning. "You should return to your duties, Miss Carter, and you should reconsider your lists." He inclined his head slightly. "Good evening." She left the study with her pulse racing and her mind in chaos. She had insulted a duke. corrected his spelling, criticized his method of choosing a wife, and instead of dismissing her, he had written her name on his list. That night, Evelyn lay awake in her small room staring at the ceiling. This was impossible, dangerous, foolish, and yet, beneath the fear, something stirred that she had not felt in 5 long years. Hope. Evelyn did not sleep. She closed her eyes, but her mind replayed the moment again and again. The scratch of his pen, the sound of her name being written, the way he had looked at her as if she were not invisible. By morning, the entire house buzzed with anticipation. Miss Caroline Hargrove arrived just after breakfast in a cloud of pale blue silk and confidence. She was beautiful in a polished way, golden hair perfectly arranged, posture straight as a ruler. Her father owned half the rail lines in Connecticut. Her dowry was rumored to be large enough to repair every tenant cottage on the Ashford estates. Evelyn stood behind Mrs. Whitmore's chair as Caroline entered the drawing room. "Your Grace," Caroline said sweetly as Sebastian approached. "It is always such a pleasure." Sebastian bowed with measured politeness. "Miss Hargrove." His tone was flawless, respectful, distant. Evelyn told herself that she imagined the way his eyes flickered past Caroline's shoulder and found her in the corner of the room. "You are pale," Mrs. Whitmore murmured without looking at her. "Did you quarrel with someone important?" "I corrected his spelling," Evelyn whispered. "Mrs." While Whitmore's shoulders shook once. "You did not." "I did." "Good girl," Evelyn almost laughed. The morning passed in polite conversation and garden walks. Evelyn accompanied Mrs. Whitmore along the gravel paths, while the other young women fluttered around the Duke like bright birds. Sebastian walked beside Caroline for most of the afternoon. They discussed estate improvements and charitable work. Caroline spoke confidently about schools and hospitals. She would make a suitable duchess. Evelyn kept her eyes on the roses. That evening at dinner, the seating arrangement had changed. Evelyn found her name placed halfway down the table instead of at the far end where companions usually sat. Beside her was a respected widow. Across from her sat a young congressman. This was no accident. Sebastian entered last. His gaze moved across the table, slow and deliberate. When it reached her, it paused. Caroline noticed. Her smile tightened. Dinner was formal. A conversation sparkled. Crystal glasses clinked. Halfway through the second course, Mrs. Whitmore's hand trembled. Evelyn saw it instantly. "My lady," she said softly, "are you unwell?" "Dizzy," Mrs. Whitmore admitted. Evelyn rose at once, calm, efficient. She signaled a servant, arranged for Mrs. Whitmore to be escorted upstairs without causing alarm. Sebastian appeared at her side before she reached the doorway. "What happened?" "She is lightheaded. Perhaps the heat." "Doctor." "Langley is staying in the West Wing," he said. "I will send him." "Thank you." Their eyes met for one brief second before she turned away. In Mrs. Whitmore's room, Evelyn loosened the old woman's collar and adjusted her pillows. "You handle crisis well," Mrs. Whitmore murmured. "Panic solves nothing. You have been speaking to him." Evelyn hesitated. "Yes." "And?" "He added my name to his list." Mrs. Whitmore opened both eyes at that. "He what?" "It means nothing. It never means nothing when a man rewrites a list." There was a knock at the door. Sebastian entered quietly, followed by Dr. Langley. He remained near the window while the physician examined Mrs. Whitmore. His posture was controlled, but his eyes kept drifting toward Evelyn. After the doctor declared Mrs. Whitmore stable and in need only of rest, Sebastian stepped closer. "You should sleep," he told Evelyn. "You look exhausted." "I am fine. That is not what I asked." His voice softened just slightly. You care for her, he said. Yes. Not because she pays you. No. He studied her for a long moment. I am not accustomed to people who stay out of loyalty rather than advantage. Then you should become accustomed, she replied. Something shifted in his expression. That night, unable to rest, Evelyn walked in the gardens under the moonlight. She told herself she needed air. She told herself she was not hoping he would follow. Footsteps sounded behind her. You should not wander alone, Sebastian said. I am hardly a target for thieves. That is not what concerns me. They stood beneath the tall oak near the fountain. You upset my plans, he said quietly. You had plans for every hour of this week, for every year of my life. And now? Now I find I am uncertain. She folded her hands tightly to keep them from trembling. You were going to propose to Miss Hargrove. I was considering it. Because her dowry would benefit your estates. Yes. And because she fits neatly into your columns. He gave a short breath that might have been a laugh. Yes. And what of me? She asked. Yet you do not fit anywhere. That should trouble you. It does. Silence settled between them. Tell me to stop, he said suddenly. Stop what? Thinking about you. Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain he could hear it. You are a duke, she whispered. I am a companion. You are Evelyn Carter. And that changes nothing. It changes everything. He stepped closer. I have never been reckless, he said. Never acted without calculation. And yet for 3 days, I've done nothing but think of a woman who walked into my study and challenged me. This is foolish. Perhaps. Society will laugh. I do not care. You will ruin your reputation. I am tired of living for reputation. His hand lifted as if to touch her, then hesitated. I need to know, he said. Is this one-sided? She should deny it. She should protect herself. Instead, she shook her head. No. The word barely left her lips. A relief crossed his face like sunlight breaking through clouds. Then we are both lost, he said softly. The next days were a blur of stolen glances and careful distance. Sebastian continued his public attentions to Caroline, but something had changed. His smile did not reach his eyes. Caroline saw it. One afternoon, she cornered Evelyn in the hallway. You think you are clever, Caroline said quietly. I do not. You forget your place. I am well aware of it. You will not keep him. I am not trying to. Caroline's expression hardened. My father's support could expand these estates for generations. And love? Evelyn asked before she could stop herself. Love, Caroline replied coolly, is a luxury. That evening, Sebastian requested a private walk with Caroline. The house buzzed with expectation. Evelyn watched from an upstairs window as they crossed the lawn together. She felt foolish for caring. When Sebastian returned alone, his face was pale, but resolute. Caroline did not join dinner. Where is Miss Hargrove? Mrs. Whitmore asked bluntly. She has retired, Sebastian replied evenly. Later that night, he found Evelyn in the library. I told her the truth, he said. And? She was gracious, but disappointed. You have made an enemy. I would rather face an enemy than lose you. Her breath caught. You should not say things you cannot mean. I mean them. He stepped closer. I love you. The words landed between them like thunder. You do not? She said, though her voice shook. I do. You barely know me. I know enough. He took her hands. I love your courage, your honesty, the way you refuse to disappear. Her eyes filled with tears. This cannot end well. I do not care about the ending, he said, only that it begins with you. She searched his face for doubt, found none. "I love you too," she whispered. He drew her into his arms, and for the first time in 5 years, Evelyn allowed herself to believe she might be chosen for herself. But in the shadows of Ashford Manor, resentment was growing, and somewhere far from the oak tree and the fountain, a plan was already beginning to form. The storm did not break the way Evelyn expected. It arrived in the form of a letter. 3 days after Sebastian told Caroline Hargrove the truth, and a formal envelope bearing the Hargrove family crest was delivered to Ashford Manor. Sebastian read it in his study. Evelyn stood across from him, her hands clasped tightly. His face changed as he read. "What is it?" she asked quietly. He lowered the letter. "Her father is filing a breach of promise suit." Evelyn felt the room tilt. "But you never proposed." "It does not matter. He claims my repeated attentions created expectation, but that withdrawing them has caused humiliation and damage to Miss Hargrove's reputation." "That is absurd." "It is strategic," Sebastian said grimly. "If it goes to court, every detail of our courtship will be examined. Your past, my conduct. The newspapers will devour it." Evelyn's throat tightened. "My father's debts," she whispered. "Yes. My years as a companion. Yes. Charles Bennet. Yes." Her heart pounded. "I will not ruin you." "You are not ruining me. This will stain your name." He crossed the room in 2 strides and took her hands. "I would rather endure scandal than live without you. You say that now. I will say it tomorrow." He held her gaze. "I am not retreating." Later that afternoon, they met with Mr. Harrison, the Ashford family solicitor, in Boston. The office smelled of ink and old paper. "The suit has little legal merit," Mr. Harrison explained. "But the public proceedings would be damaging. Miss Hargrove's father is influential. He intends to drag this out." "There must be a way to stop it," Evelyn said. "There is," the solicitor replied carefully. "Settlement." Sebastian's jaw tightened. What does he want? Mr. Harrison folded his hands. "A public statement ending your engagement to Miss Carter. A declaration that you regret any misunderstanding with Miss Hargrove." Silence filled the room. Lady Evelyn felt something inside her collapse. This was the moment. She turned to Sebastian. "You should do it," she said softly. He stared at her. "You cannot be serious. I will not be the reason your estates suffer. My estates will survive. Your name may not. I do not care." "I do," she said, her voice breaking. "I care." He knelt before her chair, his gray eyes fierce. "I have spent my life making decisions based on advantage, but I will not make this one that way. You cannot sacrifice everything." "I am not sacrificing," he said firmly. "I am choosing." Tears blurred her vision. "And if I asked you to let me go?" His hands tightened around hers. "Then I would refuse." The solicitor cleared his throat gently. "There is another possibility. If you were already married, the narrative changes. A husband defending his wife against false claims is very different from a duke breaking an engagement." Sebastian looked at Evelyn. "Marry me tomorrow," he said. She blinked. "Tomorrow?" "I will obtain a special license." "This is madness. This is clarity." He rose. "I will not give them time to interfere." Evelyn's heart raced. No grand celebration, no society approval, just courage. "Do you want me?" he asked quietly. "Yes." "Then nothing else matters." They were married the next afternoon in a small Boston chapel. Mrs. Whitmore insisted on attending despite the long journey. She sat proudly in the front pew, dabbing her eyes. But when Sebastian placed the ring on Evelyn's finger, the world felt steady for the first time in years. "I love you," he whispered. I love you. The newspapers reported the marriage within days. The headlines were sharp. Duke marries companion. Society speculates. Caroline Hargrove retreats from public view. Evelyn braced herself. But something unexpected happened. A week after the wedding, another letter arrived, this time in Caroline's handwriting. Evelyn opened it with trembling hands. Your Grace, I write without my father's knowledge. The suit was never my wish. I allowed pride to cloud my judgment. The Duke was always courteous, never promising what he did not intend to give. I will not support a lie. I have withdrawn my testimony. Without it, the case collapses. You were correct about one thing. Love is not a luxury. It is a necessity. I hope one day to find what you have found. Caroline Hargrove. And Evelyn read the letter twice before handing it to Sebastian. Relief flooded his face. It is over, he said. The suit dissolved within days. Society moved on to the next scandal, as it always did. Years passed. Ashford Manor changed. Laughter echoed through its halls. Children ran across its lawns. Evelyn stood one evening on the terrace, watching her son attempt to teach his younger sister how to throw a ball. Sebastian came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. Still not on my list, she teased. He smiled. I burned every list I ever made. Every one? Except one. He disappeared inside and returned with a folded, worn piece of paper. The old guest list, her name written at the bottom in dark ink. Miss Evelyn Carter. You kept it. It was the moment everything changed. She looked up at him. You crossed out a name. I did. And you wrote mine. I did. Why? He brushed a curl from her cheek. Yeah, because you were the first person who saw me as a man instead of a title. And you were the first person who saw me as more than a companion. He smiled softly. I was calculating my entire life. Then you walked into my study and laughed. She laughed now. You spelled dependable wrong. I have never recovered from the humiliation. She rested her head against his chest. You never needed a list. Perhaps not. He kissed her hair. But I am grateful for the one that led me to you. The sun dipped below the hills, painting the sky gold. Below them, their children's laughter rose into the evening air. Evelyn closed her eyes and let herself feel it fully. 5 years of loss had once convinced her she would live unseen. But one reckless moment, one correction, one crossed-out name, had changed everything.